Hello, Master Sul Ramakrishna here. Basically, we are discussing on the topic that is city creation. City creation, basically, we are discussing on the topic that is the vitamins creation. Vitamin creation, basically, we are discussing one of the problem that is one of the topic that is of one person's problem, basically. So, one of the person told that small problem basically connected to up to what level, basically. You see, basically, it was just a simple problem, basically. Assume basically that was basically the marriage problem. Assume that basically the marriage problem. Due to marriage problem, basically he was not getting the job also basically. That one person basically was not rich basically, and he was poor basically. That rich girl basically, she basically have big contacts like Tata Groups, Birlas, Ambanis, who are basically still staying in the Mumbai city basically, and the Mittal group basically. As if that basically this group, that girl basically was having connected connection with this group basically. Due to that basically the UN also basically tried to kill that particular person basically. So the problem basically connected to this group basically, this person basically, and this person basically was connected with this group basically. This group, group basically start getting the problem basically from that particular person's energy basically, and that person's energy basically, this group basically again basically, because Earth planet basically gets the energy from many planets also basically. So these planets basically, this peoples basically that are basically staying in the other planet, they basically started generating the problem, and then basically the problem converted into one disease basically, and that basically killed 50 crore people basically. So one of the person told that in there is one system basically in TCS basically, that is basically the system is, if you basically can't solve the problem basically, the TCS system basically says that basically, that is basically real system basically that I have seen that basically. TCS group basically say that if basically we can't solve the problem, we passes the problem to the other team basically. The TCS group basically never ignores the problem basically. TCS is that group basically, they never ignores the problem basically. I will like take one example also basically of the TCS basically, that is Tata group basically. They never ignores the problem basically. So one of the person told that basically, so one of the person told that basically never ignore the problem basically in your entire life basically. Reason example is TCS group basically, they never ignores the problem. So now basically what basically the TCS group basically, as if that basically I had taken one example of the plane crash basically which was happened in 11 basically September basically, and that was New York Stock Exchange basically, not New York Stock Exchange, I think it was World Trade Center. Yeah. World Trade Center basically hit two planes basically. That was actually not going to hit to the World Trade Center basically, that was going to hit to the Himalaya and Mount Everest basically by mistake. Actually that was not my mistake also basically, it might possible that one of the person basically might have tracked that basically. Lots of planes basically are getting disappeared basically in front of him only basically, because the developers basically who do the coding basically, they always keeps data with them also basically, and that's very dangerous basically of the for the business group basically, business point of basically, they basically, and they have to keep also basically, that also basically you can say, because if problem is basically occurring, then basically how they can track basically, that's why basically they might be keeping the control basically. So he basically kept the control, and he basically got that basically lots of planes basically are getting crashed basically in Himalaya and Mount Everest basically. After that basically the plane is not moving to the other side also basically, that is the thing basically. He basically tracked that basically, where is this mountain basically, and the mountain basically was in India basically. He basically asked one of his friend basically in India basically, he basically told that basically what is basically in Himalaya and what is in Mount Everest. They told that basically there basically nobody goes basically, there basically nobody goes basically, and that is very big mountain basically. After that basically I think basically the many less country basically exist in that other side basically. It's not possible basically the plane can cross the Himalaya mountain and Mount Everest basically, because the chaining system basically is like that basically. So then basically track that basically, yeah, and this was basically information given by the Indian group basically. Then basically he tracked that basically, yeah, this is basically some big problem basically. So he basically, what do you know basically what he has done? He basically changed a few, assume that basically 6 plane direction basically he changed to the America city basically, because the plane which was getting crashed basically 35% basically plane was of America basically. So he basically shifted the, and America basically is very dangerous country basically. So he shifted the plane to the America only basically. Why? Because America is that type of country basically. If their people basically die basically, even basically one or two people also basically died there, dies basically of American citizen basically, they creates a big issue basically. So see basically up to what level things basically are connected. So the person basically got know that basically this basically America is this kind of people basically. So he shifted the plane to the America side basically. He can shift to the plane to the other country also basically, but he shifted the plane to the America only basically. Shifted the plane to the America. There basically World Trade Center basically crashed, and this basically American government basically was knowing that basically this type of plane basically gets crashed basically in Himalaya and Mount Everest basically. But basically the plane was crashed in Mount Everest and Himalaya basically. Sorry, in the New York, in the World Trade Center basically. They were basically very shocked basically. How this happened basically. Because according to their plan basically the plane was going to hit to the Himalaya and Mount Everest. That also 100 plane basically gets hit basically per day basically. That basically their routine basically. One of the person told that also basically. So 100 plane basically was hitting basically. Few plane basically crashed in the World Trade Center basically. And police department basically, very few police department basically knows this basically that. And this in that time basically the Tata person basically, that was the Ratan Tata group basically. He was in USA basically, and he immediately basically shifted from USA to India back. That means one of the person basically asked the question basically. Tata group was knowing this basically, that Himalaya and Mount Everest basically the 100 plane was getting crashed. One of the person told directly also basically. And he was also tracking that plane basically. That also basically, because he is the richest person basically in this world basically. So he was tracking that basically. And he was connected with that 22 lakh crore basically dollar. So lots of question basically was that basically. So many people say that basically he ran away from the America basically. Because it might possible that basically the of the police department might catch him basically, and they might basically create problem to that particular person. So he basically immediately shifted to the India basically, because he was knowing basically that basically this is basically done by Indian group only basically. And this is basically story basically which was basically written in one of the Wikipedia page basically, which was actually read by me only basically when basically I was in Mumbai basically. And that page basically immediately basically got disappeared also basically. And now basically in Mumbai basically the scene is like that basically, not a single cyber cafe also exists. That means one of the person told that somebody, Sunil, basically was tracking you also in Mumbai basically. That also basically one of the person told that basically, that somebody was tracking you also basically in Mumbai. And Mumbai is basically Marathiyo ka area. That is basically the Maharashtrian city basically. That means one of the Marathi person basically was tracking you basically. And it might possible that basically he only basically might have created a problem to your life. And in this basically the Tata group also basically might be connected. That is basically just basically I am guessing basically. This is basically I am just guessing is basically whether it is correct that. But one of the person told that why basically Tata came back basically. That was question basically. That was actually question basically. Why Tata group basically came back. So that basically is different topic. Here basically the thing is basically Tata has not ignored that problem basically. That was Ratan Tata. He basically has not ignored that problem, and he immediately basically shifted to the India. But after some time basically, otherwise basically America is very dangerous country basically. They might possible that basically they also track basically why he came back basically. But few people basically might have tracked basically that why he came back basically from America. So one of the person told that it might possible that basically might possible. So they basically, the Tata group basically never ignores the problem basically. That basically I know basically. and I basically got this information also